Hey, what's up? This is Benji Bruce here, and I want to talk about a big mistake that speakers make when they're basically trying to get gigs. And this is a mistake that most speakers make without realizing it, and it really does hold them back. So, the mistake that I'm talking about is perspective. So a lot of speakers, they always think and do things from their perspective versus the perspective of the person hiring them. So it's either your perspective or their perspective. And what I mean as an example is, let's say someone goes to your website, and let's say you're a motivational speaker. Well, someone goes to your website, they're ready to hire a motivational speaker, and there are two things that usually pop up on a motivational speaker's website. Number one, you either see the words motivational speaker. That's like the first thing you see, or like inspirational speaker as something else, but either motivational speaker or inspirational speaker. Or number two, you see like a tagline type of thing, something like creating a new you or inspiring people one at a time, and so some type of slick tagline that speakers tend to have on their website. Now, something like this is very simple when it comes from your perspective versus their perspective of them hiring you. So when you think about it from them hiring you, I'm hiring a motivational speaker. I'm ready to pay 10 grand for a motivational speaker. I go to a website and it says creating a new you. Well, as the event planner, I kind of say to myself, well, what do they do? So that's the first thing that's popping into my mind as an event planner. Versus if I go to a website and the first thing I see is motivational speaker. Well, now I'm like, okay, I'm obviously in the right spot. So even something as small as that, as what you have on your website, to where most people, they want to get fancy and they want to put their tagline on there, be a new you, changing the world one person at a time, and things like that, versus just having like motivational speaker or inspirational speaker or leadership speaker, whatever topic you talk about. Most speakers try to have like this fancy schmancy tagline, and when someone goes to their website, they don't really get it. So something as simple as that, it's thinking from your perspective versus thinking from their perspective. We tend to think that we're being clear, but we're really not. So, for example, like you think, if you're a speaker, you think of maybe selling your products, but what they're thinking of is having just a good keynote speaker in general. So maybe you feature your products on your website and on your blog, but they just want to know if you're good, so they can actually they just want to see a freaking video of you on stage speaking. Now, psychologists, they actually have a name for this, and this is called theory of mind. And they did a test on little kids to see at what age the kid could actually see things from another person's perspective. So they had a 5-year-old kid and they showed him a crayon box. And they took all the crayons out of the box and they put candy inside the box. And then they asked the 5-year-old kid, they said, hey, if someone opens this box, what do you think they will think is inside the box? And the 5-year-old looked at them like they're stupid, and he said, well, they're going to think there's crayons in the box, even though there's candy. So the 5-year-old's like, well, I'm not stupid. But then they did that to a 3-year-old, and they took crayons and they took the crayons out of the box. And they were obviously watching this, so they took the crayons out of the box and they put candy in the box. And then when they asked the 3-year-old, they said, hey, when someone comes up and they see this crayon box, what do they think is going to be inside the crayon box? And the 3-year-old said, well, they think there's going to be candy inside the box. So the 3-year-old didn't have this theory of mind. They couldn't see things from another person's perspective. So they just assumed that other people saw things from their own perspective. And without knowing it, speakers act the same way 3-year-olds act versus the way the 5-year-old actually acts. And one of the most common things that I actually see speakers do is they confuse the message with the hiring process. So they think that just because they have a good message, then that means they're going to get hired. But obviously that's not how it works. I mean, once again, the speaker is thinking from their perspective and not the perspective of the person hiring them. The event planner hiring them, they don't know if your message is good. You might have the greatest message in the world, but they don't know that. And of course, you're going to say it's the best thing since sliced bread. So they don't really know if your message is good or not. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. They don't really know. So if you want to get hired to speak and you want to convince them to pay you 10 grand for a 60-minute keynote, then you have to see things from their perspective. And I want you to just think about it right now. You're hiring a speaker. Let's say you're an event planner. You're hiring a speaker. You have 10 grand to spend on a speaker to do a 60-minute keynote. How do you actually go about choosing one? Now, hopefully you don't say that, oh, you want a speaker with good content, because the problem with saying that is, once again, you're thinking from your perspective. You see, you might want a speaker with good content, but you don't know if their content is good unless you've actually seen their presentation. It's kind of like going to a bookstore and you want to buy a book. You don't know if a book is good until you've already read the book. So how else do you make that decision? How do you figure out if a book is good? So maybe you're at a bookstore, maybe you go on your phone and you look up online, you look at the reviews. So you go to Amazon, you look at the reviews, people say it's good or not. So you look at what other people say. Or maybe you actually read a little bit of the book and maybe you like a chapter or two and you're like, okay, this is cool, I'm going to buy the book. Well, people hire speakers the same way they buy a book at a bookstore. And if you truly look at things from their perspective and not yours, then you're going to build your speaking business a lot faster than you think. So think about the book. They look at reviews for the book. They go and look at reviews. Well, they look at reviews on you. They read a chapter or two to decide if the book is good. Well, the event planners, they actually look up a couple of your presentations and they watch videos of these small clips of your presentations and they decide, okay, maybe he's good or not. All of this really comes down to just looking at things from their perspective and not yours. So from now on, if you want to build your speaking business, then you always have to look at things from their perspective, the perspective of the person hiring you, and not your own perspective.